Well,
did.
Okay, let's call this Measure J Commission meeting to order. This is the Measure J Commission, January 16, 2020. And Ariana, if we can do roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernstein and Vice Chair Craig are out this evening. Commissioner Federer.
good job. It's hard.
Chair Gazan.
Here.
Commissioner Gray.
Here.
Commissioner LaBranch.
Here.
Commissioner Lass.
Here.
Commissioner Robin.
Here.
Commissioner Soto.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll have Commissioner Gray lead us off. Okay, do we have a motion to accept today's agenda?
I so move.
A second?
A second.
Okay. Also a motion to approve last month's minutes from December 18th.
I move.
Second.
Okay, this is time for public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Measure J Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. Although the Measure J Commission values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. There will be 3 minutes for each speaker. Do we have someone? No? Okay. Well, welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. Just want to remind everyone to please speak into the microphone when you do speak, and then when you're not speaking, to turn it off. There can be interference sometimes if several mics are on at one time. I would like to congratulate staff, our engineering staff, for what I think seemed to be a pretty seamless and successful conversion of Indian Canyon. It looks great. It's, I drove down it a few times and it almost feels natural, like it's always been there, which is kind of weird. So, so congrats, and I'm hoping the police reports show that it's been successful too so far. So, we have Dr. David Reddy here joining us again. What a pleasure. We'll hand it off to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. So Indian Avenue may be a good lead-in, but I want to talk about traffic light synchronization in a moment. But before I do, I just wanted to just briefly note that 5A on your agenda, discussion on capital projects. I just wanted to know, Mr. Chairman, the mayor had asked, and actually the budget subcommittee had asked, which was the mayor and Councilmember Middleton, to have this on there just because there was some discussion of the parks projects. Now, I know you've been having some discussions on them. Ellen is here today. She's going to talk about just some general things, but apparently what's occurring is the Parks and Rec Commission is in the process of prioritizing their list of capital projects. Once they do that, what the council subcommittee wanted was to then get that into this body. And I don't know if maybe a subcommittee of both to do some work, but then ultimately from their recommendation, then through your recommendation, a priority of projects, if in fact you want to do any of them, would then go to council. So Ellen is here sort of to start that process discussion with you. So when you get to this item, she's going to talk a little bit more of what they're doing at the board. So that's why that's there. Now, Indian Canyon and traffic light synchronization. So, and I haven't even had a chance to share this with Marcus yet. Some complaints are coming in of, why did we do Indian Canyon? It's cars are all backed up now. Now, ultimately, it's a good thing, and it will be a good project, but what we're finding is the traffic lights aren't necessarily all completely in sync because we're trying to do too many left turn protected permissives, do this and don't do that. And it obviously may need some refinement. That being said, citywide, we've got a serious problem, I think, with traffic light synchronization. And so for us to really deal with it, there's a couple things to do. There's some low-hanging fruit of just retiming them, but there are others, there's too many, not all of them require protective permissives. Like, so for example, even after protective permissive comes on and it goes off, you still should be able, in some cases, to turn left if you yield, where some you can, some you can't. Some are split. So, for example, it's green only one side only, and then green on the other. Long story short, that sort of outlines the problem. What I want to do at the meeting of the 30th, because we need to get moving on this, is Marcus has put together a proposal from our on-call traffic signal synchronization engineer. It's about $250,000 study citywide of everything. And then we're going to get a list of recommendations. Some things we're able to do quickly. Other things are going to take more infrastructure. But that's a path council had asked us to go down. So what I'm here to ask you is that our council agenda is next week, and there's too many agendas going, and I didn't get a chance to formally put it on here. But I'm recommending council approve that $250,000 contract. And the source of funding, only source of funding we have is Measure J. Now, that may obviously cause you some heartburn, I understand that. I'm trying to keep this moving. The reason I'm asking you and letting you know that I would like to do this is a couple things. One, we have a pot of about $5 million of projects that aren't going to be done this year. We're working to that, but that's sitting there. In addition, the finance director is going to tell you she's about ready. We're going back to council, and we're going to add, I don't want to steal your thunder,
Go ahead.
several $1 million of new additional revenue to Measure J. So, but that's a separate discussion. But what I wanted to let you know is a staff report has to go out next Thursday for this contract at 250, and it will have a funding source of Measure J. And I just wanted to let you know that that's what I was intending to do.
This is that we just got.
I don't know what that is.
Yes, that's it.
That's it, 252. So,
And David, this would address even Indian Canyon then as well? It's everywhere,
well,
citywide.
Well,
and-
Indian, yeah, it's everywhere, but Indian Canyon is more of a current contract. We were going to be dealing with just the current contract. Now, so this is not on your agenda, so obviously there's no action for you to take. However, if you're completely angry about this, when I get to the council meeting next week, I certainly will convey that displeasure. So I'm not doing this in a vacuum, I just need to get it moving. If you're okay with it, great. I'll have it formally on your agenda next week. If you're not okay with it, before council votes on it, I certainly will make sure of the direction you've given me, and you certainly are welcome to give them your opinion as well. So, Mr. Chairman, that is a long way of saying that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Okay, we'll
Ready.
open.
This study is for now, or is it while you're doing road work, or is this for long-term as
It's
the city will
yes.
function?
It's long-term. Now,
Okay.
the results of this are going to say, we can do these things quickly now at a cost of X, and these larger issues at a big capital cost. Now, anything that occurs from there obviously is going to go through a much longer vetting process with Measure J and council. But right now, we need to analyze and identify what the problem is, how to improve the traffic flow.
In the whole city?
In the whole
the
city.
future?
Yes.
Okay.
And are some of those future costs going to come to Measure J?
Well, they all will. They
Okay.
they would all have to be well vetted, indeed.
And just a clarification on the timing, so council needs to see this next week. And then when is exactly the ideal start? It says over a period of 6 months is the study. And so when is the kind of ideal start time that you're hoping for?
So as soon as council gives authorization, we will award the contract, and then they start within the next two months. The 6-month period is because they're actually going to go to every single intersection, open up the cabinets, look inside, check out what's going on, and it would require a significant amount of time to do that. So that's why we have the 6 months in there.
I have a question. So, who really is in charge of most of these lights? Is this an electrical, Southern California Electric? Is this Caltrans? Is it the city? I mean, you say you're gonna go into every box, but maybe you can explain to me a little bit about how and who controls this situation
Right.
now?
In summary, Mr. Gray, Caltrans obviously is separate, and Caltrans would be Gene Autry 111 outside of the city. Before the recession, we used to have traffic engineers, two people, one person, two people? One, a dedicated traffic engineer. Since that time, we've contracted out, St. Francis is the actual name of the company? They're the current company. So we've contracted out our traffic engineering maintenance. So any issues we will do with them. So outside of the Caltrans on Gene Autry, all the other lights are ours. And so we have control over them.
And, but is this, so it's not California, so when you did this work on Indian Canyon or wherever you do a crosswalk and all the rest, you bring in a separate contractor, as I assume, who then programs these lights, and then once the project's done, sort of just walks away, and then the city's
Yes.
firm then is sort of in control if the light goes crazy. So when a light goes out and it goes, on flashing red or who knows what, there's an accident, somebody hits a pole, how does that get
Marcus?
reprogrammed and put back into service?
Marcus, why don't you?
So that's our maintenance contractor. So they're responding 24/7 to any problems at any signal, including flashing red. And so they go in and they make all the repairs and adjustments. The timing, so in each of those cabinets that you see at a signal, there's a computer. And so the engineer that does the traffic signal design does the timing plan, and it gets in the weeds, but there's specific requirements on how much time you have for pedestrian crossing, all yellow, or a yellow gap and all red gap. So every signal we have, 5 seconds or 3 seconds of all red, because people blow through the red. So there's all these parameters that are programmed into this computer that dictate how a signal cycles. What we're talking about is we're talking about that, but we're also talking about, we do have all of our major corridors that speak to each other. But the problem is it's a combination of wireless and some hardwired interconnect on the different arterials. And equipment goes bad. So like the wireless, it's by radio or modem or dial-up, I don't know, it's a mixture of everything. And so one little thing goes wrong, it goes offline, and now they're not speaking to each other. So that's what the bulk of what this is gonna do, is go back and look at all of those corridors that are interconnected, get them speaking to each other, getting it speaking to our traffic management center here in engineering, and so that everything's gonna flow, and also updating those timing signal plans on all of those interconnected corridors. So in theory, if you drive the speed limit, and I've seen it work in Palm Desert, they have it running really well. So that's the goal here, is we have the infrastructure, but some of the components have gone bad. And just they're not, or as we learned, it's things that you wouldn't think of, like when the Rowan was built, it blocked the line of sight. Was it the Rowan? Anyway, something happened where it blocked the line of sight of the radio signals. So you have to build now another antenna, so these things happen. And that's the benefit of having Kimley Horn, a large traffic engineering company that can go out and do all of that work. What David also added was we have all the other intersections that are just in what's called free. They don't speak to another signal because they're remote. And those timing plans maybe need to be reviewed and updated and adjusted.
And some of those are triggered too by sensors within the pavement,
They're all
correct?
triggered either, most of them have been converted to video detection, so those cameras you see are not recording anything. All it is it's sending a video image to the the computer. And when it actually visually sees a car, it senses it. The old style was the magnetic loops in the pavement.
And have you seen where there's a green arrow, but there's no cars in there to go turn? And
Right.
everyone else is waiting. It just makes you crazy. Why is that? So those are the kinds of things need to be,
So sometimes the cameras go
Yeah.
kerfluff, whatever you want to.
yeah.
They get a little kerfuffled or
In addition to
whatever.
what Marcus is saying, we have a federal and state grants that's going to replace 17 traffic signals. So we're moving in conjunction with what we're doing here. We're going to have 17 new traffic signal intersections.
Yeah, so we've gotten about 8 million in federal funds to basically upgrade 42 signals. Now, most of those upgrades will be taking them from protected permissive to protected phasing, where you get the green arrow, because of the problem with the high volume of accidents that we've had, where people don't yield and cause accidents.
But we're going to have that discussion at council too as a policy matter, because sometimes they don't all have to be protected permissive. Protected. They could be protected permissive, so you could just don't turn in front of someone. But
Yeah,
but council needs to make that policy decision. And
Well,
some are more need more protection than others, some intersections.
And it seems like we added the protective permissive in the last 10 years at a lot of intersections, and I thought it was just very well received. Obviously maybe, I don't know, that it causes accidents, but I know people are going to get perturbed too if they have to sit and wait for that green arrow and can't turn
When there's no oncoming
when
traffic.
there's no oncoming traffic.
So it sounds like we're all in agreement that there's a lot of potential improvements to our traffic system. A couple questions on the recommended regularity of a study like this, and if this is something that then at the conclusion of the study, if it could be, this is assumed it's done every 10 years, or kind of what is the just kind of ongoing studies that are going to be done, and just kind of plan for, I think, Measure J in the future. We're approaching the 8-year mark. We should be keeping this in mind, or whatever it might be. So, or if that's even something that happens.
It's a good question.
Once we have Kimley Horn completing this work, we're going to keep them engaged to monitor the traffic management center so that they can actually see when something goes offline, because it'll tell them on the screen. And so they can go in and they can then fix what's wrong. So the heavy lifting is happening with this contract, and then it'll just be continuing monitoring.
And then
going on.
what I do in the budget is ask council to fund that ongoing contract just through the operating dollars, not Measure J.
Beyond like the maintenance issue, like the immediate response, just the thorough, comprehensive analysis, is there a frequency that's recommended?
And would we need to keep in mind the arena as well? Because that's obviously going to have an impact on traffic in certain areas. And I don't know, this study is going to be done prior to that, but if that's something to consider too, that kind of influx.
Right, well, that was sort of relates me to my question too. So, College of the Desert, so there's a big empty piece of property right now. In 5 years, there may be, 1,000 or 2,000 cars going in there on a daily basis. So does this study anticipate what, like the arena, like College of the Desert, like housing developments that have been approved, does it anticipate the new number of cars that would be needed and the traffic flow in the next, let's say, 5 years?
No, that wouldn't. This is more for current, but that equation that you just articulated is an important one that would be as part of the actual project once they start building.
What is it you actually need from this group?
Well, I guess what I want to do is I want to at least inform you, so it wouldn't be a surprise to you when you saw it on a staff report. What I'm going to say there in the council is that Measure J has not formally approved this, that I've briefed them, and I will put it, make sure it's on your next agenda if you, after the fact. Now, in the event that you don't approve it then council, with that recommendation, then can either undo this or give me some other direction.
And to clarify, source of funds for the 252 would be by deferring some of the work that's naturally deferred for existing road commitments?
Well, nothing would be deferred. This was money that wouldn't be spent in the fiscal year anyway, just because we wouldn't be able to get the project completed. It's been allocated,
Yes.
but more importantly, the finance director is going to, and actually, we'll be adding several $1 million more to your Measure J budget unappropriated. So there's a pot of money there that's not being spent.
So the good news, fresh funds
Yes,
becomes the source for this
technically, yes.
surprise, this
Technically.
needed surprise. And everything else continues on its path, timing to be
Yes.
resolved by real-world conditions, including maybe increases in costs.
Well, at our last meeting, we had more than $1 million that hadn't been allocated either. So this is, I don't see it as a problem. I just see it as an issue that obviously other things that are on the list might not get funded right away.
That's right. There's a list of one right now.
Right. So,
To
but-
tap into the good news
but
funding.
to me, and I don't know, I think this is something we need to talk about, and as we go forward and asking for money and with council in May. I believe that the time I've been on this commission and people prior to it, there have always been what I would call urgent requests from the city every year. And I would like to just hold back, you know, say $500,000 for those. If we don't need to use that in this fiscal year, can always be rolled over. But I don't like the fact that we allocate everything to our last dime, and then something comes up that we don't have the money. So that would just be my recommendation, that we formally, in the future, just make sure that we actually have enough money, because there's always going to be something. There's going to be a cost overrun. There's going to be all kinds of things that over the years, you know, this David Reddy's come to us, or other people have come to us and said, well, sorry, folks, but we really need this money. So, you know, whether it's the downtown park, whether it's whatever it has been. So that would be my recommendation to the committee, but that's not for today, but that's as we go forward to discuss how we ask for money for council in May, that we hold back a certain amount of money for these kinds of things every year.
I just want to make sure I hear you correctly. So you're saying to establish like a Measure J reserve?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, for each fiscal year, so that it does, you know, so that we could budget against it, and maybe one year it would all be spent and another years it wouldn't be, but we would every year go back to that, whatever we decide, $500,000 or whatever.
Dr. Reddy, I'm new to this, and so this is my first time on this commission, and, you know, new to the area as well. So I'm just curious as to, it seems like it's presented with a real sense of urgency. And my question is, you know, what prompted this urgency? Or is this the approach, is this standard operating procedure that when something comes up, I mean, I really wonder, how long has this been percolating? Has it been on the back burner for a while? And suddenly it's presented here with a sense of, you know, please, we need the funds, let's do it. If this is, maybe this is standard operating procedure, I'd just like to understand that, so that going forward, why is there never, you know, sort of, is there some prompting that this is coming down the pike, so we're going to be asking people for something? Or could you clear me and
Sure.
clarify this for me, please?
Sure. So generally, the normal process in the budget process, Measure J goes through their protocols, and they ultimately make a recommendation to City Council during the budget process, and that results in a list of capital projects. So that's what you have. This is something I didn't want to wait until the budget process going another year. Basically, the new process, we have a 2-year budget, and the new process budget year in April will be some tweaks, April, May. But this we thought was more important to get moving sooner than later. Now, if in a more perfect process, this would have come to you at your last meeting, and you would have given me some formal direction. However, that did not occur, and that's my fault.
And council could vote to approve these funds, correct?
Yes.
And override any decision by this body to say it's coming from Measure J in 2 weeks.
Right. However, they are interested in your opinion.
Right.
And if you told me
I
you
realize
absolutely
that.
hated this, I would make sure they were aware of that, and they
Well,
could say, no, we're not going to do it.
Okay, for the sake of time, I don't think anyone's heads are popping off over this. And, you know, I think, I mean, this is something I've heard scuttlebutt over for years, people wishing that some things were synchronized better as far as lights and things of that nature. So I think overall, I think by looking at everybody, we're semi-okay with this to just move on to go to council.
And as a practical matter, because LaBranche, Mr. LaBranche, you actually has a good question. In how this actually materializes, we thought we had a much lower price. But when we realized that it didn't include what we wanted, that this higher price, we, when it was roughly half this, maybe we could have found some other money, but at this level, we just didn't have those dollars except for Measure J.
So this is kind of unexpected,
Yes.
but it just goes under that category?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on, and we will go to Nancy with the Finance Director's report.
Good afternoon. We'll go to the multi-year summary of available Measure J funds. And if you look at the bottom, at mid-year, we're at $10 million compared to the prior year at $9.2 million, which is an increase of $1.3 million. And if we're at that point of $10 million at 1920, if we can stay on this track, we're going to have excess funds for the next year. On the next page, I created a new schedule which will show you the available balances, and it'll show you the ads, project ads that we did. If you look at the second column over, that total of 12.2, that's money that we haven't really spent yet, but which was added on. If you note that we did come in, our revenues came in $2 million higher than projected. So if you look at, in the middle of the page, account number 5000, the unscheduled capital projects is now at $4.3 million. If you go back to the prior page, as we discussed at the last meeting, we will come back in April, and unallocated funds will be $8.1 million. So that's what we will be budgeting in the future in April from May. The audit, we generally have two auditors audit the Measure J. One does an audit and one does a agreed upon procedures. The agreed upon procedures hasn't been completed and reviewed yet, but the audit completed by LSL is in your packet here. The audit had no internal findings, which is good, and an unqualified opinion, which means everything was great. There were no findings, and we're happy and pleased with the results. Did you have any questions at this time?
I'm good. Everybody good?
The annual audit, this is an annual audit every single year, right?
Yes, it's required.
Yep, we had this last year, same company. Okay. Thank you so much, Nancy. We like good news. Oh, quick question?
As a matter of procedure, do you tend to keep the same, oh, sorry.
I have. As a matter of procedure, do you tend to keep the same auditor for a particular period? Do you rotate them?
We rotate them, so the next auditing firm we have hired is the Penn Group. So they will be doing the audit for the next 3 fiscal years.
Okay.
And then we'll probably either extend their contract for 2 or 3 years or go back out for RFP process at that time.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Soto?
So just to confirm, the 4.3 is the new number that we should be keeping in mind in terms of unallocated, right? For
Correct.
this year?
Yes.
Got it.
And that's to date. And then the figure that we can keep in mind as we talk with staff about unfunded capital, we're looking at 8.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, Mr. Chairman, with that, because we're doing a 2-year budget, this would be the second year of our 2-year budget. What council did indicate is that at budget time, which would be July, actually a couple months prior to that, if you wanted to give them a recommendation on these additional funds at that point, I think that would be an appropriate time for them to entertain a revised list on your recommendations.
Nancy, could you clarify, for the 2021 budget, we have unallocated funds of 8.1 million, correct?
Correct.
And you're saying that unscheduled capital from 1920 is 4. Would it be the addition of the 2 that we're going to have next year, or is it? Or is
You're going to
that-
have the 4 plus the 8.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of make that clear. So it's 8 plus 4, so we're going to have.
For new projects.
Correct.
Correct.
So it's 12 million
For this
For next
this
year.
coming,
next year. For next year.
So 1920,
Yeah,
we
to look
currently
at.
have right now unscheduled projects, 4.2 million. If you go back to the multi-year summary available, we'll be going back like we did last year in May. And we always have the specific categories that we budget for years ahead. And the balance after that will be 8.1 million.
Now, is that, to clarify, is that include or is that in addition to the 2 million that we would be paying to the Andaz for parking if it's completed. Is the 2 million included in that 8?
No, the 2 million to the Andes is being paid from Lori Kibbe's parking fee. The Andes 2 million that was previously budgeted was allocated to the downtown park.
Thank you.
And so we're looking at adding the 4 million to this 8 million in consideration for next year's project, for the unfunded capital list that we have in front of us right now. Okay.
Assuming we don't do something in July to do a supplementary recommendation, isn't that what?
Well, last year we came back and we got regrouped in May and we went through, I think we went through it twice, capital projects listing before we went to the council and gave them our list. And so we'll be scheduling, if we're going to add any new projects or reallocate the projects, the time to do that would be in May. The second year budget has to be adopted by the end of June of each year. Even though it's a 2-year budget, it still has to go back and be approved by council in June, by the end of June.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I think I have the same question as Commissioner Last, but I don't think I understood your answer. So the recommendation by Dr. Reddy was that the council's going to be looking at a 2-year budget. And so we may want to consider that when making our list of priorities. But regardless, we're going to have to revisit every year to confirm the list. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Okay.
You can actually basically do a 2-year list if you want, but usually if you also can wait and see how much money you have left over. But the time that we have to go back with the list to get approved is before June. So we'll regroup in April and May and go through our list. And then we go to the council, as Measure J committee, you'll go to the council and go through your list with them.
Could you tell me again where the 4 million something or other is located on these pages?
So if you go to the multi-year summary, available Measure J funds, go to the
I
next
see.
page.
Yeah.
And it starts with the budget add-ons, your revised budget, which includes any of the carryovers from the prior fiscal year, your expenditures. And if you go to the right column and the account number is 5000, it's about in the middle of the page. It's unscheduled capital projects. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I don't think, did you explain where it came from? Okay.
The 2 million came from projection, revenues came over, projected revenues were 2 million more.
I have 2 questions. When a project is done, how do the people involved in that project ask for their money? Specifically, the library strategic plan is done, and I have been asked how they recoup the money that they have spent to carry out that process. Am I clear?
No.
So if a project is completed, if it's on here, so let's say that the project, and this is what we did at carryover time.
Okay.
So the engineers went through the list and determined what projects were completed. If the project was completed and had a balance left, it got rolled up back into the unscheduled capital projects for reuse, if you will.
Right, I think you're talking about a
reallocation.
reimbursement
Yes, I think so.
to the trust fund.
Correct. Because they are finished with that, and the output of the money came from the trust fund, I assume. I've been asked that by library people.
Right, I don't know that was ever brought to anyone that it was a loan. Now, I suppose that could be a request, and we would add that, for your consideration, but right now, there's no intent to reimburse them at the moment.
For that study.
Right, so the trust chose to do the study.
Okay.
Without using Measure J funds, which had been allocated, though.
Right,
So,
allocated for the project.
right. So they should have not done it the way they did it. They used trust funds rather than Measure J funds, and now they realize that they sort of did it backwards. So we have money sitting there in Measure J that's allocated for that particular project, but they use trust fund money, I think is the question. So they asked me and Linda what we should do to, well, basically, they shouldn't have done it the way they did it, but if they did, and now they wish to be reimbursed, how do they do that?
Yeah. So advocating for Measure J, the library is going to cost way more than what you have anyway, so there's nothing, you don't have the dollars to pay back, in theory. Advocating for the trust fund, then you're right, we probably should have had that request before and conditioned on that money, but it wasn't. So now it would just be a request. Yeah.
Who does the request
So-
go
You didn't
to?
have to do that, thank you.
Who would the request go to, and who would initiate?
Well, I think it would go to, it'd start here at Measure J, that the Library Trust Fund wanted to make that request.
I think they think that since we allocated the money,
For the library
well, no,
project.
but it was for,
Yeah, we approved this a
we approved.
little
money-
under a year ago.
We approved money for a study, library planning, and so library planning is what they did.
Yeah. Well, we've got, just for, we've got another 70,000 going to library planning, potentially for the Mark Rio study on the park and the library in the
Right,
park.
right, right.
So that's another 75,000 potentially, or more. That we're expecting the library and the subcommittee to give us direction to bring that to the next council meeting, so.
So from the library subcommittee, it seems to me, we need to go back to them and say, if you wish to be reimbursed from Measure J for this particular project, you need to make a formal request
Yeah.
that we know that.
Yes,
Because we don't know even what they're asking.
yes, that would be the best process, and then you could make a recommendation based on their request.
Okay,
I think they had no idea the process.
yeah, yeah.
And now all of a sudden, that's over and they're thinking they are
Yeah.
doing money. And I'm
But-
not advocating that should happen
Yeah.
because as you say, you have another project there. So there might be some enlightenment to the Board of Trustees about what the process is.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, they may not get their money, but, you know, I
So,
was
But
just
the-
asked how
yeah,
to.
sure.
so
But
you
the money
give
that
us
we
the-
approved will still go to them in some
Well, and,
right, right, right.
form,
Yeah,
for-
yeah.
because they're going to have a lot of expenditures.
Yeah.
So we can just reconvene the library subcommittee to see whether somebody can just go to the trustees' meeting, which is, I believe, next week, and just say they need to make a formal request of what it is they're asking for reimbursement and what that was for, and I assume it was for their study, that group, that study or whatever they did, and I don't know what that cost was.
The process is to ask for funding prior to beginning a project. And so I
Or-
think
right,
that's,
we would have, we would have done an agreement with them,
Yeah.
that would have been,
we just are
better.
asking clarification because
sure.
they're asking us. But I think
Understand.
it's clear, how things should be done is not clear to the Board of Trustees, with all due respect.
right, they should just ask.
Yeah, and they're going to get more money, so they need to be aware how to go about that.
Yes.
Right, but some of the confusion lies, so the Wellwood patio, they wanted to come to us for Measure J, and then they did that, and then the city said, oh, well, we have money somewhere else. So I think they are a little confused as to when they should come and when they shouldn't come, because, you know, we didn't provide them any money for this project that just got approved, and yet
Right,
they thought.
they paid for that.
Yeah.
Or- no, you.
City council's paying for that.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
capital
so,
project, yes.
so other funds are available, and I think they're very confused as to how to make the requests, and so I don't know how.
You know, Mr. Gray, it may be helpful, Marks and I ought to join, we've never joined that trust, it's the highly powerful secret library trust fund meeting, so I would be happy to join, and just talk about process going forward, it might be helpful.
I would recommend that because you do have new people
Okay.
there, and it takes a long time to figure out what you're doing with that money.
When do they normally meet?
I believe
Thursday.
I think it's the fourth Thursday
Okay,
of the month,
we'll-
but I could be wrong.
We'll confirm.
So
So
Anyway.
did they contract that themselves then?
I'm not
No,
speaking
we,
for
we,
any
we,
of
we have, we are the holder of their money, they direct us of how they want it spent, and then we actually do it.
So we
go
did
through-
carry through the contract. It came through
Right,
our,
right, we go through our procurement formalities, but they direct where their money
and
is
then
spent.
somehow they paid for it through their trust funds.
Yes.
No, yes.
So when it went to city council,
Even though, didn't they know that they knew that we were, okay, so they just paid for it wrong. The bill should have come to Measure J.
the request, when it went to city council, should have said the funding is coming from Measure J rather than the funding is coming from the library trust fund.
And
And
I
that
don't
wasn't,
mean to
I'm
speak
surprised that
for the
wasn't clear.
trust fund,
Okay.
David. I don't think I want to make a comment about the trust fund. Was asked the question, you've given me the answer, but they need some clarification.
Yeah.
That would be my point.
The library is an ongoing conversation and funding priority for the city, so this is just like a tiny sliver of communication barriers and kind of transparency opportunities. So I think, this is just like a learning opportunity, and we can make sure as the funding requests get much, much bigger, that it's very clear how and when and who is paying for each part.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful.
But just a short answer is, if they wanted to make a request, that's something that Measure J could consider.
Okay, yes.
A comment or a question. What seems distinct with the library as the trustees acting as an independent body separate from the city, I could understand, I could visualize how that independent body might have the impression that approval of funds is effectively unrestricted or unqualified. And knowing that this has been evolving over a long time, my perception of a lesson learned for future rounds is when a bucket of cash is approved for use outside of the hard lines of city control, when something is characterized as study funds, soft costs to develop a project, there seems to be a need for some type of formality way beyond the step of asking for money. It really should be, I think, a process that requires pre-qualification, whether it's through city expertise or through this formal setting, that the future application for funds is for an approved specifically approved purpose, not a generally approved purpose. So bring that all back together. I could understand library trustees saying, well, we did a study, so let's get our reimbursement for the study because a study was approved. That's very general. And I can't say with any confidence that the purpose that would have been discussed over months, years, and resulted in the authorization for study funding is what Measure J intended. Not that there's anything other than maybe an accidental misunderstanding of which type of study to pursue. You could see this getting worse in a future setting that might have this one look very innocent. So an end of commentary, but I'd view that as the fabric of a lesson for a next time around.
Okay. Staff reports.
Chair, in the interest of time, would it be okay if the parks folks come up and discuss their projects? And we can circle back to some, most of our projects have been talked about a little bit during the course of the last hour, so I can circle back and, or would you, the report's pretty short, so I can continue.
Yeah, let's do yours real quick. And does your report also include the unfunded list?
Yeah, yes, it includes the unfunded list, which is a list from last meeting that I brought forward.
And I know what came out of that is we did want clarification from Parks. We're not going to get that completely today, but that they're working on their priorities.
Right.
And then
I wanted to touch a little bit upon the bridge funding projects that we're experiencing, or statewide,
the bridges.
bridge projects are coming in a little bit higher than cost, and I wanted to take the opportunity to mention to the
Okay. And then-
commission that we might come back and ask for funds in the future if it comes to that. I just wanted to make you aware of that, the 6 bridge projects that we have going on.
And when we consider this list as well, that totals to the 31 million, so we're looking at a pot of money of 14 million then, based on the previous? Okay. So, all right, I'll let you take it away, Joel. Thank you. Or I'm sorry, 12 million, yes.
Yeah, it's 12 million. Yeah, so that's kind of in brief. Don could talk a little bit about the sidewalk gap closure that's almost complete.
Yeah, just a quick update. We did get the opportunity to use the metal stamp in the concrete that you purchased or you gave to us. And that location is at Camino Real and Sonora. So if you are about town and want to look at what it looks like, but pretty much we're pretty much 98% complete with the project. We're just doing, punch list items, fix a little thing here and there. But all of the sidewalks have been built that were part of that Measure J package.
And we actually were able to find a few areas that there was gaps that were pretty close to our project, and we went ahead and worked with the contractor to complete those as well. So we were successful in finding more gaps in sidewalks and doing that work as well. So.
Okay.
And we talked a little bit about the Indian Canyon two-way conversion. So, yeah, that's kind of my report.
Can we get an update for everyone on the downtown park progress?
Sure. So the contractor it was actually one of the projects that I wanted to talk about. The contractor is fully mobilized. They've done demo to the existing parking structure. They're actually opened up the ground. They're currently working on the underground mechanical room. You can't see it from the street.
Any milestones that they've missed on their schedule at this point?
At this point, we're fully on schedule.
Okay.
Dirt's actually starting to be removed from the site, and contractors, just revving to go.
When you said demo of underground, what are they demoing?
So as part of the project, there was a ladder structure or a staircase that was coming down. They removed that because that's where the new buildings are going to go, the police substation. Right. And
So nothing under the ground.
We're just doing underground infrastructure.
right, there's a ramp going down that was going down. That's being demoed, and that's where they're going to constructing the underground mechanical room for the park itself.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. I know that we wanted plenty of time to look at the unfunded capital projects as we evaluated last year, and I kind of looked at last year compared to this year, and last year we had about 22 line items to consider and a total budget of 42 million. This year we have only 12 line items to consider at 31 million. So obviously we're considering some big ticket items that could definitely take up a lot of the budget. In years past, we have taken this list and we have submitted our top priorities and then submitted them to Ariana, and that way we could kind of weed out. And I don't know if that's appropriate with a shorter list like this. And we certainly can do that after this meeting, and we can ask questions today, review this. I'd like to know a little bit from staff what they feel is a priority. And then we could maybe just choose our top 3, because obviously a storm drain improvement is 8 million, and that pretty much takes up the majority of the budget. Some things that kind of stuck out to me, again, I think parks we need to table. We talked last meeting that we would table anything to do with Sunrise Park as far as pickleball courts or anything to do with that as the library goes through that whole analysis of improvements to that whole campus. And we're hoping that there'll be some dynamic plans related to that. Another concern I had was fire station number 1, again, another big line item of 8 million. And I'm just curious, Dr. Reddy, would the tribe be involved in the cost of this at all? Because this is downtown, adjacent to their properties. I know that we have to accommodate possibly getting an additional or our only ladder truck to be located in that location due to the arena and all the buildings that they're building, potentially a hotel. Again, I hate to approve $8 million when maybe this is something that's a shared cost.
Mr. Chairman, the question is very pertinent. That fire station as it is woefully inadequate for the downtown growth and the future growth that's coming. We do know it needs to be expanded. We have purchased the lot next to it, vacant lot, so it's room to be expanded there, although that's not the most ideal spot. There's no commitment from the tribe at this point. Those discussions are ongoing. We're actually scheduling our first meeting next week to talk about a lot of the arena issues that will come up. So you're right, that pot of money would not be spent clearly this year. And the decision that council is going to have to grapple with is, do you just renovate the current location, or is it going to be expanded, an expanded one there or somewhere else? And at that point then, is there going to be a partnership with the tribe? So those are unanswered questions.
Okay. One other question I had too for staff. We did get a letter from a citizen regarding some land, and I'm just curious if, I didn't quite understand in the letter, if the city owns the property. And again, this could play into parks. This was a 15-acre parcel currently for sale at Rimrock Cove, just east of the Vons on Highway 111. Who is currently selling that property?
Is that correct?
And is it, so this has nothing to do with the city?
No.
So, okay. Okay, so their request is almost for the city to purchase that property? Correct. All right, well. Okay, that's up to, okay. I'll open it up for comment. And so, for the fire station number one, is that something that is not a priority then?
Well, no, it's a
I mean, I know it's a huge
yeah.
priority, but for this go-around.
I think the best that I can tell you, Mr. Chair, is my goal is within the next 6 months, a decision to be made whether we're just going to renovate that current location or we're going to do something larger. The easiest thing is just to go ahead with a renovation. That should be able to be decided within the next 6 months.
Do we know what a renovation, have we gotten
Marcus, that cost,
bid?
I mean, would be at least,
We spent about $5 million to renovate and expand Fire Station 4. We suggested it would be $8 million at Fire Station 1, just because we're probably going to have to go 2 floors, because it's a smaller site, even with the additional lot, and it's a historic site. So we just added contingency to the budget.
So the 8 million is really for renovation and not equipment
Expansion.
or expansion to meet the needs
Correct.
of.
Well, I think that would accommodate some expansion, but it's just a guess at this point. We really have to get an architect on board to figure out, well, we first need to know if we're going to stay there or go somewhere new. And then, get an architect on board to develop some preliminary estimates.
And,
But we're going to need a big chunk of change.
right, and then obviously it's uncertain whether the owner of the arena, someone could pony up and say, we're going to be a good neighbor and.
there is a willingness to discuss.
Sure.
It may be potentially a trade of land, or potentially we could receive some land in a more ideal spot, and then that would reduce our costs, and then we'd have build on that.
So if we approved 8 million hypothetically to redo one, but then a year down the road, we get land or decide to build another station, then what happens then in that situation? Or do we have an additional fire station? maybe an additional fire station that only handles maybe the ladder truck that they need?
No, it would only be
For those
one
projects?
station, so we have to
Okay.
make the decision
So the decision.
one way or the other.
Right.
Yeah.
So then that 8 million just transfers to something new.
Yes. So I would say at a minimum, if it's just the renovation, just a simple renovation, let's just say 4 million of that could be spent in the next 12 to 18 months. If it's going to be the larger one, that obviously wouldn't be able to be expended. It'd be a longer time frame if it's going to be a new location.
Does the city own that land that the station's on?
Yes, and we bought the small lot next to it, so conceivably it could be an addition, a two-story addition next to the original one when they're joined, because that original building is historic.
It's
So
historic,
the-
yeah.
So if you renovate that building for about 4 mil plus whatever else, and then the next phase would be to extend into that lot with whatever else you need,
Well-
is that a possibility?
well, that
Or
would
you
be-
don't want to be there?
That's not the ideal spot. But if
Okay.
we had, our options are just renovate the current building that's there minimally for the 2-3 million, so it's up to where it needs to be. Number two is we expand that on the lot next to it, so then that's a larger project. But ideally, the fire chief is recommending that it's in a different location altogether. There's like a 4 or 5 block radius.
Commissioner Soto.
So I'm feeling a bit of deja vu in that we had a very similar conversation except for the library last year, where it was very unclear where or how big, a historical building. And the consensus a year ago was that the commission felt like we understand that there's a pending priority and that it is a significant cost, but without knowing what it was difficult to feel comfortable putting a number to Measure J funds with having zero insight, understanding it was coming soon, but it wasn't there yet. So I would love to hear a little bit more about, in addition to the ongoing conversations, you said the next 6 months, is there going to be a similar process of, community members who are going to be part of this? I mean, at the time when we were thinking of the library, we understood that the library trust fund, there was a lot of decision makers who were kind of evaluating options, and then there was the building subcommittee. Is this also going to be like a huge process like that for the fire station, or those types of conditions are really helpful for us to understand kind of
Sure.
important projects that
Yeah.
are still vague at this point?
So, Ms. Soto, the library, which is a community resource, a lot of input as to where and what that should be. It's differentiated with the fire station. We really would take our cues from the fire professionals ideally of how the coverage is for the city. So the community input would be less on the where. The pinch points, if you are, is obviously besides the funding, is the tribe going to participate, or Oakview Group, and where would be a location? So ideally, for example, in a 3 or 4 block range around it, is if we had to purchase that land too, and maybe that makes it cost prohibitive and we just need to stay where we are. There's some discussions that maybe there may be some other ways to obtain that land, and that's what we hope to know in the coming months. And then that's easier then for everyone to make a decision when we actually have some real options.
And then would you need that money in that next fiscal period?
Well, and that's where you could be assured we're not going to spend the 8 million in the next 12 months. So if you wanted to say, okay, here, you guys keep your 4 and we're going to spend the other 4, and when you need more money a year and a half from now, then, we're going to have more revenue, you can then, so you would have some flexibility to spend some of this now, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Can you take that same concept to some of the other projects, which is use one by example?
Yes,
So
all the projects, exactly.
Storm drain line.
Yes, yes.
The elephant projects, the big projects, can they be bifurcated either, it can't get done next year, it's just too much time, too big. How can those be segmented off into a singular fiscal year need? Such as, we need a year for study time. We need soft costs, ramp up into it. We'll take phase 1, and then we'll come back in a year for phase 2,
Yeah.
which might be a multi-year project.
We can do that essentially for everything on the list.
And
Yeah.
so that just clears a great path for some others, maybe which aren't on the list already, that are maybe park-oriented or smaller community needs that could fill out the year more completely.
And to, one second, just to dovetail on that, and I want that to be for everyone's consideration, and we've got an example of that on this list, and that would be the lighting, or the line item 8, the LED ball field light ribbon. So that's phase 2. So we had approved phase 1 last year. So again, it's kind of logical to some degree to continue on with that project, and so I would at least look at that and give it your consideration for phase 2, because otherwise that project is kind of stalled. And that kind of goes with what we're saying. It's like, okay, we approved maybe a little bit for the library now, a little bit for the fire station now. It's going to come back to us a year from now. Okay, Commissioner Gray.
Yeah, one of the things that would be useful, I think, in addition to this list, is that a projected completion. So you want the fire station done in 4 years, okay? You want the library done in 4 years, or 5 years, or whatever it is. It's like streets and it's like the downtown. I would be more in favor of saying, okay, for the next 5 fiscal years, we are going to allocate $2.5 million to the library. And I don't want to discuss this every single year. That way, at the end of 5 years, you have $10 million. Everybody knows $10 million is committed. The community knows this. City Council knows this. The Board of Trustees know it. Everybody knows you got $10 million from the city for a project, whatever the money, whatever we happen to decide. And then we don't have 31 million in one fiscal year. We really have only, maybe 10 million of this money in fiscal year. And then, but that would mean that next year, we don't have to discuss this same list over and over and over. And I know that's more our process, but I think what's not helpful, what we don't have on here is this storm drain. Yes, it's really important. How long will that take, and when would you like it to be completed? And if so, then we can work backwards and say, okay, this, we need $1 million for, or $1.5 million for 5 years, and then it will be finished. I understand when the project goes out to bid, if you don't have the money, that's the crucial problem. Right. So that means really what you're asking for is, when is this project going to really start? Not so much all the planning and all the rest, but when's it going to start? And if we knew when it was going to start, is that going to be fiscal year, 2027 or 2025? I don't know, but because you're not really telling us that. And so that's really where I get hung up on these big numbers, knowing that we should be allocating money every year for these big projects.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And maybe that could be, and I know there's not a crystal ball on all of it, but you do go into the breakdown and into the detail. And I think, too, just looking at this, it's just so hard to, we choose one thing, it sucks up the budget. And that one thing is going to probably take 3 years to complete.
Maybe even start.
Right. So, but we and David brings up a good point that we want to allow you to go to bid on some of these things because they are important, and you really don't feel comfortable going to bid unless you at least have some money to pay for the first phase of the project. So, I think that would be helpful. Another question regarding the library, obviously the $5 million is not covering the entire renovation. I mean, this is just down payments. Exactly, okay. And again, I think that kind of time frame and, that $5 million is a big down payment, but, for a project that could be 15 to 20 million.
And I think this list is not the all-inclusive list. I mean, we could have 3 or 4 times the number of projects if we really sat down and thought about, I mean, there's a whole number of other storm drains that are important. This is the most important one. So it's a challenge because you only have so much every year. And I guess we're just trying to convey there's a large number of projects that are important that exceed what's available every year. And so the question is, do you keep budgeting smaller amounts of money for more projects? Or do we focus, and that's more of a policy decision, do we focus on just budgeting the money we have every year towards these big projects we know we have to complete? The library, fire station, because Fire Station 1 isn't the only one. We have to do Fire Station 3 and Fire Station 5 eventually. All of them are generally, 3 and 4 and 5 were all built at the same time, basically. So it's kind of a policy decision that we have to have probably a discussion at the joint meeting in May.
And actually, given this, as I think about it, we probably should have a joint meeting with your city council way before May. Because I think if council gives everyone the direction, it's the fire station, the library are the two most important, and the dog park is the most important, then we all sort of get on the same page. Because right now, we're all sort of like, we're asking you to make some decisions on a policy level, maybe that you don't have any more direction than we do. And council needs to get input from the community, and then they can give us all direction. So maybe, Mr. Chairman, the thing to do is, instead of waiting till May, let's get scheduled, because council wants to do more study sessions. Let's get scheduled a joint Measure J, council, full committee, and let's have this discussion. If you're okay with that, I'll get it calendared. Okay?
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I think that that's really, really important. The only other thing I wanted to bring up is that at the last meeting, there was some discussion about talking about re-bringing Measure J to the voters. And we had some discussion as to when this sunsetted and what we needed to do and so forth and so on. I guess my concern would be that the last time the voters voted on this, there were some projects in that vote, and I would not want to go back to the voters if those projects weren't at least started, and the library is the big one. So
Yes.
I would not go back to the voters and ask for more money if we haven't actually dug a shovel and know that we're doing it. Because otherwise, I think the taxes issue would fail. And this has been a great blessing for this city to have this money. And so I think we kind of have to bite the bullet and move forward. And I know that's going to be a big project, but I don't see how the city could, in good conscience, go back to the voters without at least a plan or something. Because talk is cheap, and it's been talked about for a long time, but that's just my opinion. So I know we don't have to take it to the voters right away, but that would be just my caution.
Mr. Chairman, I'm aware that we've got people that are
Correct.
waiting to address us here.
Yeah, and I'm just going to close. It also would be helpful if we know what amount of money would start a project. So if, we're looking at fire station, we're looking at storm drain, if it's 1.5 million, 2 million to go to bid and get it moving, and I realize then we would have to kind of approve it for several years. But at least then we're not taking everything out of that 14 million. We'd have to stay committed to those projects once we commit to it, because obviously you can't start a storm drain project and, okay, we spent our 1.5 million to dig the hole and now it sits there. So we would have to be committed to that as well, but at least it would maybe break down that money so we know how to allocate that 12.5 million.
Allocate and also communicate what we're funding, right? Which I think is the other piece, to say we're spending 2 million this first year and X is going to get accomplished. When we say we approved 8 million for for a storm drain, and we don't know when it's even going to start or any, like, I think that is some of the challenges that I think this commission has been really sensitive of as to what are we funding and what does that mean and when are people going to see it and feel it. So whatever, I mean, I would defer to the engineering team about how to describe the different phases or whatever, but I think that'd be helpful for us to just make a decision and also talk about those decisions.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, appreciating all the work that gets us to every meeting. I'm repeating a request that Marcus tees off of something that you said a few minutes ago. I think it would be great to see more projects that include smaller dollar values and projects that do some incremental step for traffic safety, community safety, which would reflect some of the comments that we've heard over the past season.
Okay. Thank you. So I think you've got some direction on that. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, we will move on to the discussion of the parks, and Ms. Goodman, feel free to join us. Obviously, you can see we have complicated discussions here as far as budget. You can join as well.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ellen Goodman. I'm a Parks and Recs Commissioner. I'm joined with my colleague, David Cohan, and our Director, Cynthia Alvarado. So really hearty discussions. And first, I'll just start by thanking you for having it on the agenda and for the city's interest in really keeping these conversations alive. I just have a couple of notes. I just wanted to give you an update. The commission is going to work on what we would call a short priority list. And we're very aware that there is one bucket of Measure J funding, and we know inside that bucket there are capital improvements and projects, and there's community projects. With the state of affairs of this year's money and budgeting for next year, what we want to be able to do is come to the commission with projects that are obtainable, that they're smart, that they're reliable, right? And that they actually can get done versus something that might need to be put out multiple years from now. So I just wanted you to know that. A couple of things that we know that are in your current budget we're just really thrilled with are the restroom, which you've budgeted $1.6 million. The field lighting, the design for the field lights at $100,000, and you have in the budget set aside that $2 million should that downtown park need it. And I think we're probably all aware it probably does need it, but we were under the impression that that might be a back-end number and not a number that was needed as a front-loaded number to obtain permits or funding or other types of contracts. In the list that has been submitted but not funded, some of these have been just recurring items from multiple years ago. And as we revisit that list that we submitted years ago that are unfunded, some of those things we might be able to pull off because other things are either greater priorities for the community or for city council, or might come in at a cost ratio that can get done quicker than a number that might be very laborious. So we're looking at that. An example might be the gymnasium floor at the James O. Jesse Center. One of the things I do want to point out is a conversation we had at last month's Parks and Recs meeting, which also I see as a line item in a budget of a wish list or an unfunded, and that's the Sunrise Park and pickleball courts. We're not really quite sure where that $2.5 million came in. That is more than double of what we actually were working with the engineering department. So I just wanted to share that we're not sure where that number is, and it's extremely inflated. And if I was, on the commission, I'd probably put that aside as well. With that said, we did get some information that the city is looking at a possible blueprint for Sunrise Park, which would include, it would be a comprehensive, all-inclusive, what does that park look like? What does it look like from its activities? What does it look like from its facilities? And what does it look like from its overall brand? And we've had this discussion at Parks and Recs for 2 months now. Last month, our commission put together a subcommittee, a Sunrise Park subcommittee. And we had a volunteer from the Sunrise Park neighborhood say that he would be interested in joining that. We've had a conversation with the Arts Commission, community members. So we were thinking that it might be a really great idea if we could put together a small alliance to really look at that with the city, with multiple commissions. A Measure J commissioner could be appointed, somebody from sustainability, and so that we're all at the table for that thought process. And so that's an invitation if you would like to consider. We'd love to have somebody there, and we're prepared to start those conversations immediately. We know that the library is a big priority for the city, and we know that there are other things inside of Sunrise Park that might be time sensitive, that is not necessarily aligned with the timeline of the expansion of the library. And we'd like us all to come together and create those phases. So that's an invitation. There is a wish list. As we go through our wish list, we are looking at what needs to be proposed as a future project in a budgeted year that would not be necessarily the next 6 months, and that we know that there are some projects on the wish list that could get funded very, very quickly. We have, this is just an example, the curtains at the pavilion has a $10,000 price tag on it. It's something that probably could happen before the end of the fiscal year, and City Council could feel like they actually did a few things. Dog Park at Demuth, you heard David Reddy speak about that. It is a big priority. It is also a price tag that is palatable compared to a total park redesign. So we'll be coming back next month with a little more detail on that. I heard earlier, I will let you know that we do actively have, I don't want to call them town hall meetings, but they are community meetings and community forums. And so we've had them with the swim center and the community at the swimming pool. We've had it with pickleball and tennis. We've had it with Dog Park. We're having our second Dog Park community meeting on the 20th. So, I just wanted you to be aware that we're really extracting all the information from the community to be able to hand back to the city. I'll turn it over to David.
Thanks. I don't really have much more. I addressed this commission previously, and just thank you for allowing us to maybe catch up on both deferred maintenance items, but to also please keep in mind that to many of the residents of the city, their parks the parks and recreation facilities are really where they interface, where they come, where it's not just a problem, and we're woefully inadequate in certain areas. And there are some projects that are things like there's just no place for people to use a restroom at James O. Jesse that are very high priority. And then there are things like where do people go to recreate, parks and recreation. And the city never has money available. There's always something that's going to be more of a priority or pressing need. And it's easy to put us into the back seats over and over. So we're asking for some consideration, if you wouldn't mind seeing to it. And it's really the commission coming to you from the will of the people, from the community meetings that we have and the people speaking up to us. So thank you for your consideration.
And yes, Mr. Gray.
I guess we should have asked Mr. Reddy when he was here, but I think I heard him say that the city is contracting with some planner to look at Sunrise Park. Is the Parks and Rec aware of that, and how will you work with that planner, or is that something that, I really don't know how that's going to proceed. Do you know anything about that?
Well, so a great question, and that was the alliance that we immediately started to put together. So we were informed last month, the same way you heard it. So we heard it a month ago. Our commission immediately put together a subcommittee, and then someone from the Sunrise Park neighborhood volunteered. I had a conversation yesterday from somebody from the Arts Commission, and now we're here today. So I think that we really need an alliance of commissions and, a few community members to be able to interface with the city with their interest in that design. So I am not suggesting, I don't think any of us would be suggesting that the Parks and Recs would be the only people interfacing. I think Sunrise Park is a much bigger venture, and I think there's a lot of stakeholders. The Boys and Girls Club should be invited to be a part of that alliance, really where there's that use. The Library Commission, library trustee. So my recommendation is we put together an alliance so that we can interface with the city's engineering department so that it's not left with just one group doing all the heavy lifting. And then, Mr. Lass had his hand up. Okay, Ms. Soto.
Just to expand on Commissioner Gray's, it's unclear to me, this consultant group that has been hired,
Yeah.
are they tasked to work with this alliance, or is this like a united front so that way we are communicating effectively with the consultant?
We want to build a united front.
Okay.
We
I
have
just
no
want to make sure
idea
like
who
what
they-
the
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
how we're moving
No.
forward. Yeah.
It's grassroots. It's bottom up.
I think that's brilliant because that's the people's park, in my opinion. Downtown will be for events and our tourists, but that's the people's park, and it is an unsung hero what's there. I use the gym, and those buildings are just sagging.
I know.
And it's very sad. It can really be beautiful if the whole team comes together for safety, and we have little kids there, we have old kids there, so you have a lot of people to talk to. I really support that. Good for
Thank
you.
you.
And the city for kind of getting it together so we take a look at how everything works together. I am 100% behind that.
Thank you.
Good.
Yes, sir.
There were two things that I wanted to talk about. Thank you for being here, because we have had a number of discussions, and we're sort of collectively scratching our heads about Park and Rec kind of projects. One, is this a full list? Two, is there a priority?
Right.
And are the things that were proposed 2 years ago, are they still relevant? Did they
Right.
get funded someplace else? Is the priority shifted? And we sort of get to a point where we're starting to make allocations, and we've got great stuff about streets and about those kinds of projects, but with a couple of exceptions, the ADA compliance with bathrooms and stuff like that, we got great information. But on some of these, we're not quite sure. Is it
Right.
still relevant? Has it happened? And that would be really helpful for us, I believe, and we've talked about it a few times. So I guess, at least for me, that would be our request, is to get really more up-to-date and routinely refreshed information about where the priorities are, because it's hard for us to make decisions with anything less than that.
Right, I think the goal is going to be this list of 12 is going to grow to 15, 20 when the Parks and Rec Commission brings their projects forward. So you'll have more.
To that end, just to respond to that, we would have had that list to you on an ongoing basis. We were just told that there was no funding available and we were attending to other matters. And the story kept changing on us, kept shifting, and it wasn't coming from you, but it was coming from many different areas and from the city itself, et cetera. We were recently told, no, here's what's really going on, and the Measure J Commission, as well as the City Council, needs better information now from you that there is an opportunity here. So we're scrambling, but we couldn't have those discussions properly without agendaizing it.
Right.
So it is on our agenda for the next meeting in 2 weeks. And then we will have a list to you that we will have been able to, through public process, have a discussion, voted on, and be able to bring to you and say, this is our priority list and here's the detail.
Well, at least personally, I would find that very helpful. And I understand the downtown park kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the room. But, now that we're kind of moved on, I think it would be really, at least I think it would be really helpful. The second thing is, and you referred to it earlier, Mr. Chairman, we got this request letter about another, trying to acquire some land in Smoke Tree. Has that come to you guys? Have you talked with these folks?
Rimrock.
Rimrock, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, it has not come before the commission.
Okay, because I have to assume that before we would ever even talk about something like that, we'd want to know what you guys thought.
Sure. You might be talking about something like a Quibi. When somebody builds in the city, they make a contribution back to the city. Either they do that a number of different ways. Oftentimes it's with land, and they offer parks. I've been out on a couple of site visits to developers where they've offered that, and we've actually said no, and they turned around and gave cash. So because it's a private sale, that's what I heard from David. So when that does develop and moves forward, we will be included in the conversations around those Quimby laws.
You may not know the answer to this, but in talking about Sunrise Park and the stakeholders, I guess the city owns the stadium,
Yes.
but I'm always unclear as to who's running that stadium.
Right.
And how that stakeholder is part of Sunrise Park's plan, I think needs to be part of the discussion. So I don't really know, in doing your grassroots thing, you know, how that stakeholder is going to be brought to the table. But it seems to me that obviously Mizell and the Boys and Girls Club are separate nonprofits, but they're sort of adjacent to the park.
Right.
And I don't even know who owns them. But a lot of those things, I think, are unknown to the community. So in describing this park, it's very unclear as to, you know, are these city-owned facilities, are these
Right.
rented-out facilities? So that's just one thing. And I think that this request that we received is something that I mean, I think we should respond to this person, but I'm not sure where we should direct them, but they're
What
really.
was the request? I'm sorry.
They're asking the city to purchase a piece of property to open a new park in a different part of the city that
Got it.
doesn't have park facilities according to their request. But they directed it to Measure J when in fact it really needs to go to somebody. I mean, I don't know that it has to go to somebody is this a city priority, not just a funding source? But if you are unaware of it, I think it somehow needs to be channeled. I don't know.
I received that request. The gentleman came in the day that we were originally scheduled to meet at Measure J, and he was coming to be a public speaker. So he left the material, and I did direct him to go to Parks and Rec. We could not locate an agenda on the board. I know City Clerk did try to help him out with the date, and so he was referred to Parks
So
and
he
Rec,
wants to sell the city a piece of land and develop it as a park.
I'll add to that. He actually did show up to our last commission meeting, but he came in too late to do public comment. He asked if it was too late for us to have a discussion during the meeting, and I told him that yes, it was. It needed to be agendized. I did ask him to put together a proposal so that I could bring forth to the commission with an agenda item. I'm in the process of finalizing the agenda item, so that will probably be on this month's to discuss.
So we'll report back next month when
Yeah.
we're here.
And I mean, and this is a resident that's coming in, they don't know, I mean, obviously, I don't think the city is out shopping for property for a new park, and so, yeah. I mean, it's,
If I may, I'd like to add one more thing, and I appreciate you asking about agenda items or a wish list item that was submitted multiple years ago. It could have been submitted in 2016 and 17, but it was unfunded, and so it rolls over to 17, 18, and it's unfunded and rolls over to 18, 19. And so we're in discussion about really where those priorities are. Some of them, I can't really speak accurately, but my instinct tells me we have not gotten grants and funding for the projects that we've submitted. Most of the projects we submit really are community projects, and then some, obviously, capital improvement. One item I'd like just to bring to your attention and request some consideration. Under the 1920 budget, which we are in our 1920 year, and that ends June 30th, would that be correct? So just for memory's sake, 2 years ago, the Measure J Commission agreed to allocate money to Parks and Recs with a caveat that $2 million that they were going to allocate would be put aside for the downtown park should the park need it. So our instinct says the park needs it, downtown needs it, but it was a in case, so it was not a front-loaded number. So it's sitting here on the books, it's on line item, $2 million, that probably will not be spent by June 30th. Even though there's a lot of progress on the park, I cannot imagine that park will be completed by June 30th.
No, but we have allocated it to the downtown.
So my question would be, it is allocated, I understand that. My question is, since it won't be spent in this fiscal year, could that $2 million that is allocated in this fiscal year that balances your budget, could that $2 million be allocated to Parks and Recs projects where we have some immediate need, and then that $2 million be added next year's budget when they'll actually use the money?
Well, city council would have to make that decision because they've already made this decision, so.
It's for consideration.
Yeah,
I mean, it fiscally and from a business model, it makes sense. And it would take for us to suggest it to city council.
The contract has already been awarded, so the funds are already encumbered, so we can't, that money is no longer available for any other use than for the project itself, regardless of if it gets spent within this fiscal year, the money's encumbered already, and we
Okay.
have a contract already signed. So, but to what I was saying earlier, that the projects you bring forward are going to be part of the 12 projects that are to be considered by the commission, and there's a pot of about $12 million that can go to those projects that are in immediate need.
An immediate need would be before June 30th.
Well, no, sorry. It'd be after the fiscal year, once the commission.
So one of the things that we were informed by the city staff is that there was some money that was unspent that is extra. And that was the prompt when the city staff came to us and said, start moving again. Once the $2 million was reallocated and Parks and Recs was stalled from a funding, we were then told just a few months ago, okay, get those gears going again because there's some unspent money.
And that's the 12 million he's referring to. Yeah, the 4 million we haven't spent, it's the unallocated funds.
So you haven't spent or allocated the $4 million, and that's what you're considering now?
That will get added to our budget, our monies, to evaluate this list. So most of what you're proposing will be on this list for consideration.
And that's for 2021?
Correct.
Okay.
So an immediate need
Okay.
would be something like we were given today for this 252. And I don't know of an immediate need, if you have something that you think that you need the money for now and will be completed by June 30th.
Is there money available if there was an urgent or, top priority
It would probably
that
have
could
to
be
come
done?
through the city, but I don't know what, I guess we would need to know the specifics of what that immediate need is. Like because the way we see it and what we're learning is, projects take a long time. So unless it's something that's like, yeah, we can get this done in 2 months, but if not, if that immediate need is something that, yeah, realistically it's in next year, then that should be part of our list for consideration, and that's what we want, and that's part of your prioritization of what you want done. And I think as a commission, we take it all very seriously.
No, but that was helpful, because we know the difference between something that takes 9 months and 18 months and something that can take 90 days. So we do know the difference. Yeah, but thank you for
And
that.
that's good.
Yeah, that was clear.
You have 3 projects now. The replacement of your vehicles.
So I
Well,
think,
one is ongoing. Anyway.
right. This list is a part of what Mr., is it Lass, said, and that is some things are just kind of rolling over from year to year. So we get to look at this list and say, you know, maybe the vehicles aren't. You know, maybe the community is screaming for a bathroom at James O'Jesse, and they're screaming for Demuth Park's dog park to get finished. And so maybe that gets moved off and moved into something else. So
Right,
we
and
have to
that's part
work-
of your,
Yeah.
what we
Right.
tasked you
Yeah.
with, so that, and we need to disregard all of this that's related to
No,
parks that I said earlier.
You will come back after your meeting
Yeah.
with your new
Yes.
prioritized list. That's wonderful. And then, you know, I think David's idea in budgeting yearly, instead of looking at a big money, decide what we're committed to, put money each year for that until it's used. I think that helps the city, because they know, yeah, we got, 8 million. We don't have to have this dialogue anymore, and we don't have to look at the same project. So
And-
I think we have some budgeting.
And I think we can assume
here.
from your projects, they're typically happen quickly. You're not a storm drain. So I think when you present your list, I think we'll probably look at that most likely in totality.
Well, some of them, I mean,
I
like
mean-
the bathrooms are taking a long time.
Well, I know, and they shouldn't, but.
Well, some things just from an engineering, and because it's a city and not
Right.
a private sector.
And maybe we can, and
you know,
and maybe
move a little
staff
slower.
can help us with that if it's new bathrooms, but I would hope, that we're moving forward with the monies that we approved last year to improve those restrooms and in the current parks. But I think we're very interested in those needs, what you're hearing from the community, and it's that dog park, it's those added restrooms,
Yeah,
those
you
to
don't want to
us.
go to Ralph's and run into somebody you made a promise to, because the city council's made some promises, and now we have a new city council, and they have different interests. So I appreciate the time that you've given us. It's a lot of information, and it's a long discussion.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh,
For the Grassroots Alliance, for Sunrise Park, any kind of immediate, I recognize this is probably going to move pretty quickly. Maybe just send it to Ariana so you can send out the invitation out to all of us, or I don't know if we want to decide who would be the person on it, but I think we're in agreement that's a great idea, so we should probably.
Well, I think, your chairman, I think you'll just decide maybe who's appointed, and so that we have one consistent voice versus people just dropping in because they're interested and it not having the fluidity that it might need. So if you'd like to, you have a large commission, and so if you'd like to appoint 1 or 2 people, then just let us know, and we'll give you the dates for the first meeting.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
you're welcome, thank you. Can that be added to next month's agenda? For the sake of time, we'll just decide one.
We don't have to have that as an agenda. You can appoint to, you can
I
appoint
would be
somebody.
very interested.
Well, I
in
would-
doing that with you two, Tim.
I would appoint Commissioner Footer. I'm fine with being a backup, seeing I'm not on any subcommittee at this point.
That would be good.
That meets, and knowing a lot of history with I can bring that there too, as far as concerns. So, okay. I think that's good. I think everyone's got full plates. All right. Let's move on. Hopefully we can get through some of the new business quickly. We are at 5B, continued discussion of potential community hotspot projects and outreach. I think we kind of talked about hotspots, actually. You brought us up to date with sidewalks.
I think that should read community projects and outreach, not hotspots. I think that shouldn't hotspots be removed from that?
Okay, gotcha.
That's-
Yeah.
Did
We-
the committee,
No.
did this committee meet to
No.
talk about this?
No, I think my understanding when we left is Sid was going to chair it. We just had an informal chit chat, and it's Ms. Soto and myself and Sid. But that meeting was not called together, but you gave us a very wonderful, brief application of how the process goes. So we need to maybe get moving and have one dialogue about what we want to do, and maybe with one or you two there. And then we have the process for people to come to us with individual projects.
Right.
So that
Can we, let's move that to next month's agenda then? So, new business, so there is no communication subcommittee update at this
Yes, there
point?
is.
Or no, you guys met, sure.
Could I find out how this is going to be called when that meeting occurs with Mr. Bernstein? I really was kind of anticipating it, but I know that with all the holidays and all that jazz, it kind of like, I just figured, well, okay, but I thought that,
It's Commissioner Craig, not Jeffrey.
oh, I'm
And
sorry.
I think the four of us should find a time that's convenient to meet.
Yeah,
And
just,
so
someone's got to just start,
send
mention
that
it,
out. Let's
get it
have that
going.
away from this meeting. We can
Yeah,
get
yes.
organized. Maybe a minute tonight.
Okay, that'd be
Okay,
great.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
And so that would be, as far as new business outreach, 6C, we can just take off?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so communication subcommittee update?
Just very quickly, the medallions, we've got some communication, slightly delayed, but still on the way. Sorry. And the other thing is that we have a meeting scheduled with Amy Blaisdell on this coming Wednesday, which will also include the city's outside design firm to sort of launch discussions about the mailer that we agreed to fund. I think that's about it, unless you guys have anything else to add.
Love it. All right, great. Library subcommittee update. Has there been any, nothing there? Okay, this is good. Okay, discussion regarding Measure J schedule change to comply with city council. Did we determine that in the last meeting? Pending?
But it seems pretty clear
It seems clear that we're going to have to start the meetings no earlier than 5:30 going forward. According to council's direction, I think they're doing a second or final reading at this next council meeting. I'm not sure if that was brought to your attention or not, that all commissions and meetings, any type of meetings, will have to start at 5:30 or after 5:30 PM. And this reason for this is so that all working individuals and families can attend the meetings after they get off work.
And when does that take effect?
I will follow up and get back to you on that. I think it's after this council meeting, after it gets approved.
Okay.
How late can they go?
There's not a deadline, how late they can go. There's just a time that they can start at.
Well, and we moved a few dates
Yes, we moved
last
our
month.
meeting dates for May and September.
Is that going to affect this room and all that kind of jazz?
Our days remain the same, it's just the time, instead of starting at 4, we'd start at 5:30.
And as you may be aware, that the city council changed their meeting dates from Wednesdays to Thursdays, and that's why we had to change our schedule a little bit to make sure that our meeting dates aren't on the same date as the council meetings.
So the new hour, the new 5:30 hour could take effect as early as our next meeting?
I believe so. I believe so, but I'll have, Ariana will follow up and let you know next Tuesday.
Yeah, that includes pizza, right?
Oh, absolutely. If you're bringing it, no, kidding.
And this is a mandate. A commission cannot, okay.
And it applies to all.
But
Oh, yeah.
can we don't have to start at 5:30.
You could
we-
start at 6.
We could start at 7. We
Yes.
could start at
Yes, anytime
8.
after 5:30 PM.
So, I mean, I guess I would like a poll here as to whether people would prefer to start at 5:30, 6, 6:30, 7. I mean, I don't like 5:30 myself. I'd rather have a later meeting, but that's just me.
5:30, please.
Well, let's go around the table. Commissioner Soto.
I would say I have no preference, so I'll defer to the majority.
5:30.
5:30 for me as well, but that's mostly in deference to the staff. I mean, presumably, they don't want to be hanging around here at 8 o'clock at night.
I didn't even think about staff.
We're here for you.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was our understanding, that staff will support. We know we have to.
Well, I get it, that if you have to, you will, but I think we should be sensitive to that.
And we appreciate that. Thank you.
So are we taking that, kind of taking a vote, any form?
Poll,
of
a
vote?
poll.
Just a
Okay,
poll.
I say 5:30.
Yeah, I really don't care.
I agree. 5:30 is fine.
I think we're pretty much set at 5:30. So that's interesting. They can squeeze all of these different commissions and committees and everything to a nightly schedule, because this room can only,
All the meeting dates are already set, it's just moving the time.
yeah.
Some may have to
I just thought maybe
reschedule
there
their
were
meetings.
some meetings that are twice in a day. You know, we're at 4, maybe there was something here today at noon or 1 o'clock. You know, so then we're all fighting for the
So
5,
put in your time now.
okay.
Just in support of this measure, I recognize this is going to be a change for all of us, but commissions are a great place for leadership development of the community. And if these meetings are always during the working day, that means we're not having working professionals civically engage in a way that they possibly could. And so I recognize it's a big change for staff and all commissions, but, you know, recruitment maybe might be easier in the future. You know, I think there's a lot of other potential benefits that might take a few years to come to fruition.
And are any meetings held on weekends?
Not that I'm aware of at this time.
Staff, you might as well just move on in. We'll set up a dormitory.
I think there are some nuances to the ordinance. There's some voting that you can do for certain things. So I think when we get the full staff report from Ariana, we'll kind of understand exactly what the council just agreed upon.
And I will check with the city clerk's office either tonight or Tuesday morning. He will have more information, the city clerk, on what the requirements are if we have to. I know that they said if there are some committees that they could put through a staff report and possibly get changed to whatever the vote is, but they were pretty much wanting the 5:30 to let all residents participate in the meetings. But we will email you, I'll have Ariana email you more information on Tuesday morning, and what we will go through if there's a request to keep it at 4, and then if it has to be at 5:30, what is the date we have to start doing the meetings on, the exact date.
Yeah, I suggest you watch the item on the video, whether it's on the website or YouTube. Just watch the video because all of your questions are the same questions they had as council. There were some caveats. So I would suggest watching the meeting and you'll get a better understanding.
Okay. I don't see anyone here for public comment. Staff member comments? Anything additional? Commissioner member comments?
The only thing is, Dr. Reddy asked for an earlier meeting, right, with the council. If that date could come to us as soon as possible, it would help for scheduling. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes,
I
Commissioner
know
Sutton.
Public Arts and the Human Rights Commission is currently taking applications for new commissioners. So if you know anyone who is interested or has kind of been thinking about it, now is the time to send some last-minute reminders. They're definitely interested in those.
And the Library Board of Trustees is also looking.
great.
They had a resignation, so there is an opening on that commission, too.
And those commissions, again, were arts, you said, and?
Arts and Human Rights Commission.
Okay, great.
Those are like this week, I think, right? Yeah, they're like ASAP.
Yeah, okay. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.